Welcome back to Andersen Acres. Today we're going to talk about something that can confuse even experienced goat owners. We're going to talk about how to tell if your goat is in heat. Whether you're planning a breeding season, wondering why your goat is yelling randomly at a fence, or just trying to figure out what's going on with your herd, this video could be for you. Let's dive into what heat looks like in goats, how it varies by breed, and what signs you should actually be paying attention to. So first, let's talk about something a lot of people don't realize. Not all goats come into heat or come into season in the same way or at the same time. Some breeds are seasonal breeders. This means they only go into heat during certain times of the year, usually fall through early winter. They'll cycle only in that season. The breeds that tend to do this, they can be Nigerian dwarves, Nubians, boars, most standard dairy breeds. However, when I say Nigerian dwarfs, I'm going to have people come in going, my Nigerian dwarfs come into heat all the time. Yeah, because some mini breeds and some lines of Nigerian dwarves do cycle all year long. So pygmies and some lines of Nigerian dwarves will cycle all year long. Sorry. Sorry, there's chickens making noise. So typically, the smaller the goat, the more likely they will cycle all year long instead of just cycling in the fall and winter. The standard size goats and the larger goats do tend to cycle only seasonally. So it depends on the breed, but it also depends on the line, because there's a couple of breeds out there that can do both depending on the outcrossing that was done in that line and what traits they picked up. So when you're buying your Nigerian dwarfs, ask the person who bred them, do your Nigerian dwarfs go into heat year round? Just ask. Okay? Easy question. So now, even among seasonal breeders, there is some variation. Some goats are super regular, like clockwork, every 18 to 21 days. Others, it's total chaos. So breed is your first clue, but it's not the whole story. So breed is a good indicator of what you can expect, but goats are individuals, they're not machines. Okay? So it's important to be aware that your individual goat might not cycle exactly like every other goat in her breed. A goat's heat cycle is usually around 18 to 21 days. And the actual heat or estrus cycle lasts about 24 to 48 hours. So you usually have a 1 to 3 day window where the buck can actually get her and she'll take. So if you blink, you might miss it. You might not have noticed she was ready for the gentleman. And yes, you will miss it at least once in your life, and you'll be annoyed because you wanted babies and you missed it by a day. It's a rite of passage. You're going to be so annoyed at yourself for missing it, but it happens to all of us. If you're not tracking it, you might just think your goat is in a mood. You might even notice they're actually in heat. You might not even notice that part. And honestly, sometimes goats are just in a mood. Goats can be finicky things. Sometimes they're in heat, sometimes they're just grouchy because the sun came up in the wrong angle. You don't know. Also, that was a mosquito on my face. Man, I hate mosquitoes. So, how do you tell when your goat is actually in heat? So there are some signs to look for, some signs that don't typically happen outside of her being in heat. And one of those signs is flagging. This is definitely the most obvious and the thing you should watch for, and the thing most does will do when they're in heat. She'll wag her tail like she's trying to take flight. It's fast, okay? It's fast, and it's very much an attention getter. Sometimes nonstop. Sometimes just when the buck is near. Okay, so it could only be when the buck is near. But a lot of times it's nonstop. Or when you open a bag of snacks. They get very excited about a lot of things when they're in heat. So goats are weird, okay? So if you notice your goat flagging just because you opened a bag of chips, it's because goats are weird and she got excited. It doesn't mean she wants to make babies with the bag of chips. It's fine. You might also notice an excessive amount of yelling. And I mean, oh, the yelling. It's a very specific kind of yelling. Some goats get loud and dramatic. Others just talk more than usual. If she's normally quiet and suddenly sounds like she's narrating a soap opera, you might be looking at heat. And you also want to check for physical signs. So you're going to want to look and see if her vulva is swollen or red. And yes, we have to go there. I know it's not fun to talk about vulvas. I know that. But it's important when you're talking about, is my goat in heat? Well, take a look at her vulva. A goat in heat often has a slightly puffy, pinkish vulva. You don't need to check obsessively. But if you're unsure, just take a quick look. Professionally, casually, as one does, but take a quick look. It might not be the most glamorous thing, but it'll help you know exactly where you stand. And you also want to see if there's any discharge. A clear or a slightly cloudy mucus discharge is pretty common. That's not a sign that anything's gone wrong. That's just a sign of heat. If it's thick, green, or foul smelling, then you call the vet. But just a regular amount of discharge, it's fine. Okay? That's just heat. But if it stinks, then there's probably an infection. Call the vet. See, she's not dead. Hi, sweetheart. See, she's not dead. She's alive. She's just Arwen. I always get comments. Does that go dead? No. She's fine. Another thing you want to watch for is mounting or being mounted. Even if you only have girls, sometimes does will mount each other. And sometimes they'll stand still and let other goats mount them. So they might mount someone else. They might allow themselves to be mounted by other girls. Either way, if you see your goats kind of playing a leapfrog without a hop, heat might be the reason. Okay, they might be coming into season. Hello, ladies. Yeah? Are you ladies? Yeah? The ladies are beautiful. You also want to watch for acting bucky. Some does get a little bit weird. They act like bucks. They'll blubber and they'll flick their tongues and they'll pee on themselves. Not usually as intensely as actual bucks, but they might do it. It's not common, but it happens. Do not judge. Goats are weird. Okay? Just let it go. And of course, there will probably be some interest in bucks. And if there is a buck nearby, she might try to get closer. If there's a fence, she might try to go through it or over it, whatever works. And this is why good fencing matters, especially if you want to keep the boys and the girls apart. Okay? Love will make goats temporarily feral. Expect that they're going to attempt to break into the boy pen. And the boys will be trying to break into their pen. It's a love fest, even when you don't want it to be. Now, there are some very subtle signs that you actually might miss. Okay? Some goats are incredibly subtle, especially first-timers or does that are early in their season. You might simply not notice. And I'm dropping things on the ground because that's what I'm doing. Okay. Yes, there we go. Sorry. I have my bullet point notes that I'm dropping on the ground. I just want to make sure I don't miss anything. Ignore the ducks. Anyway, the signs you might miss. You might see a little bit of restlessness and just chalk it up to, oh, she didn't sleep great last night. You might notice there's a little bit less interest in food than normal, and a lot of us just write that off to, she's just not hungry today. One dramatic yell and then silence for 3 weeks. You might be like, well, she's not loud at all. I guess she's not. These are all things you can miss. If you're trying to time breeding, this is where sometimes people will use a buck rag, which is a cloth you rub on a buck and wave under her nose, or having a teaser weather can come in handy. I don't like buck ragging. I think it's gross. I don't do it. But some people still do. I would prefer not to. I would prefer just to pay closer attention to see when my ladies are in heat. It's much easier. Just pay more attention. It's easier. And yeah, a teaser weather is not necessarily a bad thing. Okay, so she'll probably flirt with the weather almost as much as a buck. So let's talk about seasonal versus year-round heat. I want to circle back real quick because we talked about that a little at the beginning. If you've got a goat that never seems to come in heat and she's a seasonal breeder, don't panic. Her season might be shorter than others, or she might just be really low-key about it. Not all does scream their love from the rooftops. If it's midsummer and you're waiting on a Nigerian dwarf to cycle, you might be in luck. If it's in April and you're waiting for a Nubian to cycle, you're probably going to be waiting till the fall. And some does will skip their cycles entirely if they're stressed or they're underweight or they're not getting proper nutrition. So if you notice your goats are suddenly not going into heat when they should be, check and see if there's a reason they're stressed out. Okay, if nobody's underweight and nobody's ill, maybe there's a coyote stalking the pen. It seriously will stress them out enough that they might not go into heat. So take a look, see what's stressing them out, see why they're freaking out. So, just for a quick recap, most goats cycle every 18 to 21 days, and heats typically last 24 to 48 hours. The signs can include a lot of tail wagging, they can include yelling and discharge, excessive interest in bucks or trying to get through a fence to a buck. And you should also know that seasonal breeders may not cycle year round, and some goats are sneaky, very sneaky. So, you'll have to pay attention if you want to catch them in heat. If you're planning to breed or just trying to understand your girls better, watching for signs of heat is key. And the more time you spend observing your herd, the more in tune you'll be with them. And the easier it'll be for you to figure out why they're being all odd. Because let's face it, goats are odd. That's about here for me today at Andersen Acres. If you have a goat who does something weird while she's in heat, I want to hear about it. Drop a comment below. Goat stories are one of my favorite things to read. We'll see you tomorrow.